Adapted from archaic translation by Robert Chalmers. JATAKA number 107. Salataka JATAKA prize skill. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery, about a brother who threw stone that hit a swan. We are told that this brother, who came of a good family in Shravasti city, had acquired great skill in hitting things with stones. And that hearing the truth preached one day he gave his heart to it and, giving up the world, was admitted to full brotherhood. But neither in study nor practice did he excel as a brother. One day, with a youthful brother, he went to the river Asiravati, and was standing on the bank after bathing, when he saw two white swans flying by. Said he to the younger brother, "I'll hit the hinder swan in the eye and bring it down." "Bring it down indeed," said the other. "You can't hit it. Just you wait a moment. I'll hit it on the eye this side, through the eye on the other." "Oh, nonsense. Very well. You wait and see." Then he took a three-cornered stone in his hand and threw it after the swan. Whiz went the stone through the air, and the swan, suspecting danger, stopped to listen. At once the brother seized a smooth round stone, and as the resting swan was looking in another direction, hit it full in the eye, so that the stone went in at one eye and came out at the other. And with a loud scream the swan fell to the ground at their feet. "That is a highly improper action," said the other brother, and brought him before the master, with an account of what had happened. After rebuking the brother, the master said, the same skill was his, brethren, in past times as now. And he told this story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the bodhisattva was one of the king's courtiers. And the royal priest of those days was so talkative and long-winded that, when he once started, no one else could get a word in. So the king thought about for someone to cut the priest short, and looked high and low for such an one. Now at that time there was a cripple in Benares who was a wonderful marksman with stones. And the boys used to put him on a little cart and bring him to the gates of Benares, where there is a large branching banyan tree covered with leaves. There they would gather round and give him halfpence, saying, "Make an elephant," or "Make a horse." And the cripple would throw stone after stone till he had cut the foliage into the shapes asked for. And the ground was covered with fallen leaves. On his way to his garden, the king came to the spot, and all the boys ran off in fear of the king, leaving the cripple there helpless. At the sight of the litter of leaves the king asked, as he rode by in his chariot, who had cut the leaves off. And he was told that the cripple had done it. Thinking that here might be a way to stop the priest's mouth, the king asked where the cripple was, and was shown him sitting at the foot of the tree. Then the king had him brought to him and, motioning his group of attendants to stand apart, said to the cripple, "I have a very talkative priest. Do you think you could stop his talking?" "Yes, sire, if I had a pea-shooter full of dry goat's dung," said the cripple. Then the king had him taken to the palace and set with a pea-shooter full of dry goat's dung behind a curtain with a slit in it, facing the priest's seat. When the Brahmin came to wait upon the king and was seated on the seat prepared for him, His Majesty started a conversation. And the priest then monopolized the conversation, and no one else could get a word in. On this the cripple shot the pellets of goat's dung one by one, like flies, through the slit in the curtain right into the priest's gullet. And the Brahmin swallowed the pellets down as they came, like so much oil, till all had disappeared. When the whole pea-shooter full of pellets was lodged in the priest's stomach, they swelled to the size of half a peck. And the king, knowing they were all gone, addressed the Brahmin in these words: "Reverend sir, so talkative are you, that you have swallowed down a pea-shooter full of goat's dung without noticing it. That's about as much as you will be able to take at a sitting. Now go home and take a dose of panic seed and water by way of vomiting agent, and put yourself right again." From that day the priest kept his mouth shut and sat as silent during conversation as though his lips were sealed. "Well, my ears are indebted to the cripple for this relief," said the king, and gave him 4 villages, one in the north, one in the south, one in the west, and one in the east, producing 100,000 a year. The bodhisattva came near to the king and said, "In this world, sire, skill should be cultivated by the wise. Mere skill in aiming has brought this cripple all this prosperity." So saying he uttered this stanza. Prize skill, and note the marksman lame. 4 villages reward his aim. His lesson ended, the master identified the birth by saying, "This brother was the cripple of those days, Ananda the king, and I the wise courtier." Source: adapted from archaic translation by Robert Chalmers. Jataka number 108. Bahia Jataka. Learn you early. This story was told by the master while he was living in the gabled chamber at the great grove near Vaishali city, about a Lichavi, a pious prince who had embraced the truth. He had invited the brotherhood with the Buddha at their head to his house, and there had shown great generosity towards them. Now his wife was a very fat woman, almost bloated in appearance, and she was badly dressed. Thanking the king for his hospitality, the master returned to the monastery and, after a discourse to the brethren, retired to his perfumed chamber. Assembled in the Hall of Truth, the brethren expressed their surprise that a man like this Lichavi prince should have such a fat, badly dressed woman for his wife, and be so fond of her. Entering the hall and hearing what they were discussing, the master said, "Brethren, as now, so in former times he was fond of a fat woman." Then, at their request, he told this story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the bodhisattva was one of his courtiers. And a fat and badly dressed country woman, who worked for hire, was passing near the courtyard of the palace, when pressing need for an occasion came upon her. Bending down with her dress decently gathered round her, she accomplished her purpose, and was erect again in a little time. The king was by chance to be looking out onto the courtyard through a window at the time and saw this. Thought he, "A woman who could manage this with so much decency must enjoy good health. She would be sure to be cleanly in her house. And a son born into a cleanly house would be sure to grow up cleanly and virtuous. I will make her my queen wife." And accordingly the king, first assuring himself that she was not another's, sent for her and made her his queen. And she became very near and dear to him. Not long afterwards a son was born, and this son became an universal monarch. Observing her fortunes, the bodhisattva took occasion to say to the king, "Sire, why should not care be taken duly to fulfill all proper observances, when this excellent woman by her modesty and decency in relieving nature won your majesty's favor and rose to such fortune?" And he went on to utter this stanza. "Learn you early, though stubborn folk there be. The rustic pleased the king by modesty. Thus did the great being commend the virtues of those who devoted themselves to the study of proper observances." His story ended. The master identified the birth by saying, "The husband and wife of today were also the husband and wife of those times, and I the wise courtier." Source: adapted from archaic translation by Robert Chalmers. Jataka number 109. Khuddhaka Jataka. As fares his worshipper. This story was told by the master when at Shravasti city, about a very poor man. Now at Shravasti city, the brotherhood with the Buddha at their head used to be entertained now by a single family, now by 3 or 4 families together. or a body of people or a whole street would club together, or sometimes the whole city entertained them. But on the occasion now in question it was a street that was skewing the hospitality. And the inhabitants had arranged to provide rice porridge followed by cakes. Now in that street there lived a very poor man, a hired laborer, who could not see how he could give the porridge, but resolved to give cakes. And he scraped out the red powder from empty husks and kneaded it with water into a round cake. This cake he wrapped in a leaf of swallow-wort, and baked it in the embers. When it was done, he made up his mind that none but the Buddha should have it, and accordingly took his stand immediately by the master. No sooner had the word been given to offer cakes, than he stepped forward quicker than anyone else and put his cake in the master's alms bowl. And the master declined all other cakes offered him and ate the poor man's cake. Then the whole city talked of nothing but how the all-enlightened one had not refused to eat the poor creature's bran cake. And from porters to nobles and king, all classes flocked to the spot, saluted the master, and crowded round the poor man, offering him food, or 200 to 500 pieces of money if he would make over to them the merit of his act. Thinking he had better ask the master first, he went to him and stated his case. "Take what they offer," said the master, "and bless all living creatures with your righteousness." So the man set to work to collect the offerings. Some gave twice as much as others, some 4 times as much, others 8 times as much, and so on, till 9 crores of gold were contributed. Returning thanks for the hospitality, the master went back to the monastery and after instructing the brethren and imparting his blessed teaching to them, retired to his perfumed chamber. In the evening the king sent for the poor man, and created him Lord Treasurer. Assembling in the Hall of Truth, the brethren spoke together of how the master, not refusing the poor man's bran cake, had eaten it as though it were ambrosia, and how the poor man had been enriched and made Lord Treasurer to his great good fortune. And when the master entered the hall and heard what they were talking of, he said, "Brethren, this is not the first time that I have not refused to eat that poor man's cake of bran. I did the same when I was a tree fairy, and then too was the means of his being made Lord Treasurer." So saying he told this story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the bodhisattva was a tree fairy living in a castor oil plant. And the villagers of those days were superstitious about gods. A festival came round and the villagers offered sacrifices to their respective tree fairies. Seeing this, a poor man explained worship to the castor oil tree. All the others had come with garlands, odors, perfumes, and cakes. But the poor man had only a cake of husk powder and water in a coconut shell for his tree. Standing before it, he thought within himself, "Tree fairies are used to heavenly food, and my tree fairy will not eat this cake of husk powder. Why then should I lose it outright? I will eat it myself." And he turned to go away, when the bodhisattva from the fork of his tree exclaimed, "My good man, if you were a great lord you would bring me elegant loaves of bread. But as you are a poor man, what shall I have to eat if not that cake? Rob me not of my portion." And he uttered this stanza. "As fares his worshipper, a fairy must fare. Bring me the cake, nor rob me of my share." Then the man turned again, and, seeing the bodhisattva, offered up his sacrifice. The bodhisattva fed on the flavor and said, "Why do you worship me? I am a poor man, my lord, and I worship you to be eased of my poverty. Have no more care for that. You have sacrificed to one who is grateful and mindful of kindly deeds. Round this tree, neck to neck, are buried pots of treasure. Go tell the king, and take the treasure away in wagons to the king's courtyard." There pile it in a heap, and the king shall be so well pleased that he will make you Lord Treasurer." So saying, the bodhisattva vanished from sight. The man did as he was asked, and the king made him Lord Treasurer. Thus did the poor man by aid of the bodhisattva come to great fortune. And when he died, he passed away to fare according to his deeds. His lesson ended, the master identified the birth by saying, "The poor man of today was also the poor man of those times, and I the tree fairy who lived in the castor oil tree." Source: adapted from archaic translation by Robert Chalmers, Jataka number 110. Sabasamharaka Panna. There is no all-embracing. This all-embracing question will be set out at length in the Omagga Jataka. This is the end of the all-embracing question.